All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about with this chapter was supply and demand, is the role that price plays in the free market. We talked about the different types of economies. Obviously, the United States is a market economy, and I know I've said in the past that everyone is a mixed, but typically when we talk about our economy, we talk about it as a free market economy. So prices play an extremely important role. And it's consumers, producers, and sellers who kind of work together through supply and demand that establishes that equilibrium price that we've been looking at. And we know that prices change over time because of the shifts in supply and demand. So when we shift the supply or we shift the demand or possibly both, then we see the prices change, which eventually leads to a change in quantities. So prices in the free market, a few things you need to know about that. We use prices to communicate with each other in terms of buyers and sellers, consumers and producers. They put a price tag on something and we communicate to them whether it's too high or too low by how much we purchase. Using a price is the most efficient way to distribute resources. The other thing, it serves as a standard of measure. If we didn't have a price tag on something or we didn't put a value on that, it would be very hard to do voluntary trades. So barter is one of the ways they used to do it, where they would just trade things, and that's what barter is trading. But that only works when the two people who are trying to trade each have what the other one wants. If I need something and I don't have what someone else wants, then I won't be able to get what I want. So by putting a price on it and coming up with some uniform money system that we'll talk about later, it makes way easier to enter into these voluntary exchanges. Government distribution through the command economy is not efficient. When the government gets involved, there's a lot of administrative costs, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of things to keep track of, and it's very, very expensive. If we just use prices, it all works itself out. It's kind of going back to Adam Smith. And that idea of an invisible hand. We really don't need the government to get involved. Prices will eventually work themselves out. Supply and demand will work themselves out. And it works, and it's free, and it's efficient, and it's very flexible. If we have shortages of things, it's very easy to eliminate those shortages by just raising the price. We have too much of something, it's very easy to eliminate those surpluses by just lowering the price as opposed to the government getting involved. And then prices also work as an incentive. Obviously, the higher price that they can charge without changing their cost, it either increases production or it also gives new firms an incentive to enter into those particular markets. This idea of supply shock. Every now and again, we will have a sudden shortage of a good. An example, I can remember back right after Hurricane Katrina. The price of oil and gas skyrocketed because they had to shut down the oil rigs out in the Gulf. A lot of refinery plants are down there, and so all of that was shut down. So instantly we have a situation where we have a sudden shortage of oil. And you can have a supply shock in anything, but that's just one that we're more familiar with. There are three ways to eliminate a supply shock. We can increase the supply, but obviously, the example with Hurricane Katrina, very time consuming. We had to wait until we fixed things, and it might not be something we can do right away. Rationing would be another way that we could deal with supply shock. That's very expensive. Rationing is used when supplies are low, and it is a system used to allocate goods and services using something other than price, whether it's coupons or whatever it is. And that can be very expensive. It requires a lot of administration, which costs money. They have to collect information. We have to figure out how we're going to distribute goods and services through this process. And back during World War II, when we had shortages of food and metal and rubber, we did end up rationing some of those things. One of the bad side effects of rationing, or another bad side effect, I guess, is that it can lead to black markets. So obviously, if the government is controlling the supply of things and who can get what, if somebody else wants it and they're willing to pay a much higher price for it, they can do so. Raising prices is really the best way to eliminate supply shock. It's the quickest, it's least expensive. There are zero administrative costs involved in this free market system. So when we have a situation where the oil and gas, the supply was short, what they do? They raised the price, and those who were still willing to purchase it got to. The rest of us sat home and didn't get it. So best way to get rid of the problem with the supply shock is to raise the price. And I'm going to play a short video about oil and some of the supply shock effects.
That is a live shot of New Orleans, the Big Easy getting struck by another hurricane on the 7th anniversary of Katrina. That disastrous hurricane Isaac made landfall. You can see there that house is holding up okay, but clearly New Orleans and the entire Gulf Coast getting hit by Isaac. What does it mean for oil? What does it mean for oil prices? And how does it tie into what's going on in the oil patch in general? Prices have been rising. Jerry DiColo is with us.
Right. Well,
prices at the pump been going up to begin with, right?
Right. Well, what we've been seeing over the past few days, it was described to me as kind of the classic U.S. Gulf Coast hurricane fire drill. As soon as the storm comes running through the Gulf, everyone closes down production. They sit there, they wait, they see what happens. It goes off through, prices rise, and then everyone looks at the end. And if nothing happened, prices tend to fall down. We're starting to actually see that already because it doesn't look like that when the hurricane, or excuse me, when the tropical storm went through.
No, it got upgraded to a
that's
hurricane.
Right, hurricane
got
now.
Upgraded, it's a hurricane.
When it went through the Gulf of Mexico, didn't seem to cause much of a production issue because it was a tropical storm. So
right.
It looks like those things are going to start back up pretty quickly.
So you can see, right, we had crude, not to interrupt you, we just showed crude oil down 1%.
Certainly, it's down.
So 1%. This is part of what you're talking
exactly about. Right. And so now what really the focus turns to is on land, where, to be honest, with Isaac, there actually might be a bigger issue because of the flooding. Well, we're starting to be worried about the refineries. So the Gulf Coast is, it's the biggest refining area in the United States. And right now they've shut basically every refinery down in Louisiana and Mississippi areas. And so what we have to check out now is once this thing moves through, when it drops 20 inches, 30 inches of rain, which is what they're predicting, we have to see if some of these things have flooded, when they can start to be up and cranking out gasoline and diesel again. And there is an issue right now, which is that currently gasoline supplies are pretty tight in the U.S. We've been seeing them rise throughout the summer. I mean, we're at, I think, around $3.76 a gallon U.S. average, which is very high for this time of year. And so if those refineries can't start up very quickly again, we could have some issues going through the Labor Day and into maybe the next week.
So how would you think that we'd know maybe in a couple of days, in a week?
Yeah, it'll be, right now the focus is on the storm. It's what's happening in New Orleans and what's happening, on those refineries on the Mississippi from, New Orleans to Baton Rouge. And so we have to see what's going to go through there, what's going to happen in the refineries in Mississippi. Next couple of days, we'll start getting reports from those refineries. They'll tell us if they're able to start up. They'll start up in a couple of weeks. They'll say if there's been any sort of disruptions or anything, and we'll start to get the gasoline and diesel flowing. If not, if some of those refineries are down, particularly if some of the big ones are down, that's where we can really start having an issue.
So everything that's happening with this storm right now in the Gulf Coast, how long will it take that to filter down to the tank, to the pump?
Right. Well, I mean, we could see prices move up fairly quickly within the next couple of weeks if they were to move up. And we saw it when I think when Ike came through, Hurricane Ike in 2008. There were some localized supply issues throughout the Southeast that were sending up prices and actually leading to some localized shortages in as far away as South Carolina, Georgia, those kind of areas that are relying on these refineries.
Yeah. All right. What are the chances gas prices go down to $2 a gallon?
Not very good. Not very good.
All right, Jerry DiColo, thank you very much, sir. Talk to you soon.